one of the biggest features that I found in a lot of videos was the last step is twice the rise of all the other steps. So it forces you to go into a kneel. Because for a loft, in my opinion, it makes it a very easy, convenient transition.
Welcome to the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast, the show where you learn how to plan, build, and live the tiny lifestyle. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and this is episode 263 with Lazrin Schenck. Lazrin is an entrepreneur, traveler, and tiny house builder who lives in Vermont. We actually met in person here in Vermont, and I watched Lazrin's tiny house build take shape over the course of a year or two. And I've just been so impressed with what she has accomplished. In the time since building her tiny house, it's moved a couple of times. She has purchased a piece of land for it and gotten really into working her land and using equipment to do that, and just is constantly improving her surroundings and her home. I think it's a really great attitude and a really cool lifestyle, and I wanted to share it with you. Are you looking for a fully customizable tiny home that's stylish, comfortable, and extremely well built? Look no further than the Via Tiny Homes by Atomic Homes. With over 2 decades of experience constructing sets for live events for top brands like the Super Bowl and WWE, Atomic is bringing their technical expertise to the tiny home market. The homes themselves are designed by Live Connected, a team of architects and designers. And these homes are fully customizable and come in 3 finish levels: standard, modern, or farmhouse. Add a bonus loft space, built-in storage, washer-dryer units, or even a fireplace. The Via Park Model RV is engineered to ANSI 119.5 standards and built with truly innovative techniques for increased stability, quality, and comfort. If lack of financing has kept you out of a tiny home in the past, Atomic Homes has you covered with conventional financing options available. Visit atomictinyhomes.com/THLP to customize your design today. Again, that's atomictinyhomes.com/THLP. Thank you so much to Atomic Homes for sponsoring our show. That website, again, is atomictinyhomes.com/THLP. All right, I am here with Lazrin Schenck. Lazrin is an entrepreneur, traveler, and tiny house builder who lives in Vermont. It was during an expedition on the Yukon River that the inception of the building of a tiny house took shape. At the conclusion of the trip, she decided to design and build her own. She spent a year and a half researching, planning, and building it from the trailer up. Since its completion, Lazrin has used it as her own home at times, as a long-term rental at others, and as a short-term rental while she travels. Beyond the freedom that the house has provided beyond what she ever thought, the skills and knowledge she gained throughout the process of designing, building, and owning a tiny house, and now land, have been instrumental in how she's been able to work less and play more. Lazrin Schenck, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ethan. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you. And I feel like this is like, for me, this is like the culmination of like your tiny house journey in my mind, because like I knew you before you built your tiny house, and then I kind of watched it take shape. And now you've like far surpassed me in terms of skills. Like you've bought land, you own an excavator. You're like, you're really taking it to the next level. But I want to like rewind back to that expedition on the Yukon River and just ask, what was going through your head, and what made you kind of realize that a tiny house is what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I lived out in Colorado. That's kind of where I kind of left to do this Yukon trip, and rent's just expensive. And I was feeling the sense to have like a home, but I wasn't sure where I wanted to buy, because I just lived in Colorado for 4 years. I had just moved back to Vermont. I wasn't sure where I was going to settle, and but I was sick of paying rent and never having anything at the end of the year after paying, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then also something to call my own. I was kind of young. I never really went the traditional school route. And so sitting in a canoe for 8 to 12 hours a day gives you a lot of time to think. So
yes, it does.
Yeah. So just like got to thinking, and, the tiny house movement had definitely already started at that point. I think it was kind of still in the more beginning phases, I would say, comparative to where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was just really appealing. You can have a home, you can create it how you want. You can be, very specific, while also not tying you down to a specific plot of land. And that's exactly what this house has allowed. I've moved it 3 times now, all within Vermont, but I've been able to move it 3 times, and now, like you said, I do own land, and so now it's on land that I own. And it just feels really good to have something of myself that I can, I own straight out, and then also continue to grow and develop the assets that, have the Airbnb and the tiny house allowed me to acquire.
Nice. Can you tell us about the house itself, like kind of the specs, like, what size is it? How was it built? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I did a 24-foot long trailer, 8.5 feet
Hmm.
wide. I think I maxed it out at 13.3 for the height, just to not really
Hmm.
push that 13.6 envelope that they limit you to.
Yep.
And then I bought a trailer that allowed the insulation to be sprayed into the cross members. So I didn't have
Okay.
to build a subfloor on top of the trailer base, which was really nice. And it actually allowed me to get, like, I think it was an R52 of spray foam in the floor, which,
Nice.
as I'm sure everyone on this that listens to this podcast know, tiny houses are bridges, and, it's cold underneath. So that was really nice. And then I did 24 on center studs for the framing,
Okay.
and I did spray foam throughout the whole thing. And then I did 2x6 rafters for the ceiling, and so that's R52 up top as well.
Nice.
And then for interior, I kind of did more like, I guess you could say, the cheaper route. So I just did like 1/4 inch
Okay.
plywood on for the siding and the ceiling, and I kind of regret that decision now.
Hmm.
But it was, lesson learned, and I can always go back and either add another layer of, different, like maybe shiplap kind of siding
Okay.
and stuff like that. And then I designed it with a lot of intention and focus on the kitchen. I love to cook. I love to host,
Okay.
and you cook 3 meals a day, right? So I didn't want to have the
Yep.
kitchen, and especially the sink, be a deterrent for me not to enjoy the space. So I actually have like 13 feet
Yep.
of counter
Yep.
space in my house with a 36-inch sink.
Yep.
And for me, that's really valuable and important. Like, actually, last night I even had 6 people over for dinner, and we all were cooking. So
Awesome.
I've been able to kind of like find that balance of, even though it's a small space, to be able to capitalize on what I love, and cooking is part of that, which is great. I did the traditional loft over the bathroom approach for where the bed is,
Hmm.
and I love it. You know, Ideally you want to be able to stand up in your room, but as everyone knows, you can't always get that with a tiny house. So for the setup, it's great. And then in the bathroom, I feel like, even though it is a pretty low ceiling, I have pretty big windows, it still feels pretty open and big inside,
Nice.
which again was important for me.
Nice. And you've shared a really nice set of photos that I'll put on the show notes page for this episode, so people can kind of take a look, and they don't have to just use their imaginations. You have it's not a ladder access loft, which is, I think, such a nice thing if you're gonna have to be in a loft to not have to climb a ladder to
Yep.
get there.
Yeah. And when I first built it, I don't really, I don't think I thought about rental. Maybe it crossed my mind, but
Hmm.
I was just thinking the amount of times, like, I'm groggy in the middle of the night getting down to have to go to the bathroom. I didn't want to risk that.
Hmm.
And then I also have a
Hmm.
little nephew that I was kind of thinking on in the back of my mind, even though I'm sure he would have loved the ladder. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the stairs was really hard. I think that was maybe the most challenging piece of the build to try to picture. As people will see in the photos, I have a window really close to the stairs. And so it's like, okay, how do you get the
Yeah.
rise and the run, but how do you not hit the window? But then how do you leave space for the fridge underneath the top step?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that wall got a lot of staring for many days in a row, I'd say. And I love the stairs. They're still a little, quirky for sure,
Yeah.
but with the railing, and like, you can kind of grab onto the windowsill that's up top, and it's great. And then one of the biggest features that I found in a lot of videos of tiny houses that I watched before I built was the last step is twice the rise of all the other steps.
Okay.
So it forces you to go into a kneel when you're on the second to last step, basically. So you're not having to step up
Ah.
and crunch down your head at the same time. And so it makes, because for a
Okay.
loft, in my opinion, it makes it a very easy, convenient transition to a kneeling level that you have to be in the loft area. So I like that feature that I
That's
found
clever.
in my designing process.
Now, did you have this all kind of drawn out? Like, did you have the stairs like fully designed, or did you kind of build the house and then, as you said, like there was some staring involved, like you kind of had to work it out in the
Yeah, the stairs
space?
were definitely worked out in the space. I think for the most part, I mean, I had the design. I probably went through 30 different
Hmm.
designs before I settled on it, and then I just basically had an architect
Hmm.
approve the design before, to give the fact that it wasn't gonna cave in with, a foot of snow on the roof kinda thing.
Right, right.
And so I definitely made a lot of tweaks throughout the build that were different than what the original plans called for.
Okay.
And the stairs was definitely one of them. And the stairs I knew going in that I was gonna determine that after I figured out my window trim and how much space I would actually have. And then also the last step that I have in my house underneath it fits my full fridge.
Okay.
So it's also I wasn't sure what fridge I was gonna have. So I wasn't sure the width and the depth and all that kind of stuff. So I
Ah,
had a few different puzzle pieces to have to put into place before I could have the accurate numbers to be able to determine the rise and run.
nice, nice. And I want to just quickly back up to the kitchen. Tell me about your cabinets. Did you custom build them? Are they IKEA? Are they from a cabinet shop? How
Yeah,
did you do
actually,
that?
the cabinetry was one of my best, most probably rewarding pieces of the build, and I did them from scratch.
Uh-huh.
So I made I
Wow.
made the boxes, the fronts and
Hmm.
the whole thing. And that was probably the first time that really like true carpentry skills of mine were kind of put to the test. Everything else, you can cut a 2x4 easily.
Hmm.
Zip siding is, pretty easy to have to manage. So it was the first time I had to be really
Yep.
clean
Yep.
cuts. It has to be square. One of the drawers isn't square, so it doesn't quite slide that easily, right? So a lot of time, but it was so rewarding to get done with the first box, mount it, and slide it in, and it fits like a glove, and you're like, okay, I did everything right. And for a first time
Yeah.
builder,
Yeah.
I was second guessing myself along the way all the time, and I don't regret it. Like some of them, there's like I said, a few of them have quirks to them, but again, first house,
Hmm.
and it's never been an issue, and they still slide and everything like that.
Nice.
And the beautiful thing of a small space is like I'm gonna redo the fronts this summer actually
Okay.
to choose a better quality wood that's a little harder.
Okay.
And there's enough to make it like a day's worth of a project, but not enough to make the price tag intimidating. So I like to be able to tweak and play and swap things out as I've lived in
Nice.
it and seen the wear and tear that takes place.
Yeah. And what did you do for countertops?
This is another feature that I love that I came across. I did stainless steel actually.
Hmm.
So I went and actually I had the cutout of what the countertop was. I just did a cutout of wood and I dropped it off at a auto body shop actually,
Okay.
and
Oh, nice.
they yeah, and they formed the shape of the counter to the wood piece that I dropped off. And it's so versatile. And again, because it is such a small space, you're putting everything on your counter all the time. So, when I first got it, it was pristine, obviously, but
Hmm.
now it's scratched up, but it doesn't look, it just looks, has character.
Right.
You can
Right.
put hot plates on it. Actually, I had an Airbnb guest, like burn it, and after
Yeah.
2 months, it was gone.
Yeah.
So nothing has ever permanently damaged it. And for a short-term rental, even long-term when I'm not here, it's
Yeah.
kind of peace of mind to not have to like, "Oh, are they, did the laminate come up?" or anything like that. And it makes cleaning so easy. You're never having to really scrub, even if if a
Yeah.
candle wax drips over, it's easy to come right up. So
Nice.
I love it all around. I know some people that have them, they don't love it's kind of cold,
Yeah.
but in my house, it stays really, really warm, so I've never really noticed
Hmm.
that, but some people don't like the cold touch of it, right off the bat, but for me, it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the piece of plywood that they formed that countertop to, that is there. That's kind of
Yep,
that's the piece
that's the
underneath the
base.
metal. That's the base.
Yep,
Cool.
yep. Yeah, and because it's, like, 13 feet long, I just have 1 seam, and I was able to basically hide it where my oven or my stovetop is, so I really
Yep.
only see maybe 8 inches of seam, which is also
Yep.
nice that you don't have that like, that massive line across, the whole counter, which is great.
I love that just kind of creative thinking, and also like going and buying, countertop from a kitchen, from a countertop shop is really, really expensive. So
Mhm.
anytime you can like go to an auto body shop instead, or like, use somebody who isn't, it's kind of off label, you probably save a lot of money. Do you remember what the countertop cost to do?
Yep, it was right around $1,500. So, it was more than I mean, I don't know. I didn't even look at
Yeah.
buying a countertops anywhere else, but I
Right.
have a pretty good radius curve
Yep.
on one end of it. And I remember talking with the auto body shop. They were concerned about that curve because when you're welding, it heats up and it causes the metal to bend.
Yep.
And so when I actually picked up the counter, that one area of the counter was bent up, probably at a 30-degree angle. And so
Oh,
they were
okay.
just like, they warned me about that, but
Yeah.
I made sure to really scar the bottom of the countertop really, really well. And I made sure to spread out the glue with a
Yeah.
trowel with the notches and everything accurately and just clamp the crap out of it.
Yeah. And it
And
stayed.
yeah, and it hasn't been no issues with anything of the countertop. And I think if I wanted to do that radius in a different type of
Mhm.
countertop, that would have been even added anymore. And I think that radius alone was probably about 500 of the whole 1500.
Oh, wow.
And it's a 2 by 2 foot area.
Yeah.
And it's that they actually had to use a thicker gauge steel for that area. The lip of the counter is actually twice as thick as everywhere else on the counter to be able to
Mm.
sustain that radius all the way around.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So for several years you rented land, and then you bought like raw land, like, or did you buy a cleared property?
Yeah. The property I bought, I joke that I bought a snowblower and it came with a free house. Um, so that the property I bought, it actually has a garage on it already. And
Okay.
then it did have a single wide trailer on it. So the trailer
Okay.
was, I think they're normally like 14 feet wide by 70 feet long.
Yep.
And for maybe about 30 seconds, I contemplated about fixing that trailer up and living in that while renting out my tiny house full time on the same land.
Uh-huh.
But the trailer, put it kindly, was in not good shape.
Okay.
You know, active leaks. There had been smoking in it, so which I definitely can't put up with.
Yeah.
The sides of the trailer were sagging down, so there, you know, was a pretty decent curve to the floor, and it just didn't seem worth it to put any money into it. So
Sure.
the last week of September, I rented an excavator and demolished the whole house, and I just was able to put it into 3 big Casella dumpsters.
Mm-hmm.
And then the land did have water, septic. It had all the utilities, which is why it was so appealing.
Yeah.
And, you know, how many people have a house they can move, you know, within one day and have everything hooked up. So
Right.
I demolished the house, which if anyone has a chance to do it, it's great. It's a lot of fun. Just feel to destroy something with a big excavator is great. And then I also took the opportunity to re-landscape. It was pretty dense and not really taken care of in terms of just the overgrowth. It had been a rental property, I think, for almost 10 years and, you
Okay.
know, definitely not taken care of. So I probably cut down, 150 trees, 100, 150, somewhere in there. They're more sapling size. It wasn't like a
Mm-hmm.
ton of, I mean, it was still a lot of work, but it wasn't like, you know, big pines here and
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
And then use the machine to kind of level out some land, some of the yard that was pretty steep, which made like you couldn't really stand comfortably around a bonfire at the grade it was. So I leveled it out a little bit, and then I built a rock wall to make a
Mm-hmm.
transition from 2 different stages of the yard. And then because I removed the house, I needed a place, and I'm on a well. I needed a place
Mm-hmm.
to put my pressure tank for my well.
Mm-hmm.
So where the water originally come up out of the ground that went up into the bottom of the trailer that I tore down, I then had to dig a trench, and I brought that trench all the way to the garage. And then I
Ah.
hand dug underneath the slab, and then hammer drilled through the slab, and then brought the water line up in through the bottom of the garage. And then the garage was insulated already. It's 2 by 6 construction in there
Mm-hmm.
with insulation, which was great. And then I just built a very simple, craftsmanship is not 100% on it, but just very simple, threw it up and insulated that really, really well. And so I only have to heat a small room in the garage that supplies my
Yep.
water to the whole house, which is great. And then I also have a hot water heater in there that specifically powers my washer dryer.
Okay.
And then this summers I have plans to bring hot water out to an outdoor shower and build a sauna. So I'm trying to like make the land even more usable and more enjoyable. So once I brought the water into the garage, I then also redid all the electrical. The current electrical situation, again, was far from what I would ever feel comfortable with. It was ratchet strapped into the ground with duct tape, and it was pretty sketchy. So completely took out all of that, the electrical that was there, and then just had completely new line run from the pole, which is at the very top of
Hmm.
my road, which is right on my property, basically, again, right to the garage. So now everything, basically the garage supplies everything to the property that I have now. And then also within that week of all the trees I cleared, I probably opened up probably 75 feet more of open space from the yard. And so I ended
Yeah.
up, there's a lot of springs that feed my property. And so I actually just
Hmm.
ended up building a pond because I had the excavator,
Cool.
and so that's been fun. And so it brings deer and birds, and there's a lot of frogs.
Wow.
And it's just nice to kind of hear that water trickle. I built kind of like a waterfall, the outlet, that's
Hmm.
because it's always being fed.
Yep.
And I think that's like, to go off on a tangent here, I think that's one of the things I love about the tiny house is it's small. I do love it. I love being inside it, but it forces me to be outside more. And so it's so fun to invest so much time and energy and money into the land because I enjoy it. My friends enjoy it.
Hmm.
And so the little features that I've added, and I plan to do a lot more this summer, just make you be able to enjoy Vermont, what Vermont has to offer during the months that you can be outside. And I think that's one of the beauties of a tiny house is that because it's so inexpensive, that you can, if you want to, prioritize money to continue to expand what activities and enjoyment you can get out of the property if you do own it.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody listening to this conversation might assume that were already a professional tradesperson based on what you've talked about doing to the property and to the house. Um, did you have these skills before you started on this journey, or how did you approach learning what you needed to learn to do all this?
Yeah, I definitely would say I did not have any of the skills that I think a lot of people might assume you'd need to do to be able to do this.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
grew up in a very hands-on, active family. My dad is very handsy, and built a shed, and we helped him. We built a pool, chicken coop, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think really the first time ever truly using all the tools, table saw, chop saw,
Yeah.
all the things, was when I built the tiny house. And, the beautiful thing about this day and age is the internet. You can sit down and Google,
Yes.
YouTube, anything. And, the also big thing too is you have to have a network of people you can trust to lean on and ask those
Yeah.
questions that you don't trust Google to answer correctly or YouTube to answer correctly. And so I just learned as I went. I really leaned on the individuals that, like, I mean, I reached out to you even, right, when I first started. So leaning into people that do have more knowledge at the time, and, kind of pick your way through what everyone says, because everyone's going to have a different approach slightly. And so you kind of pick what you think you can accomplish or what's in your budget, and then go from there. So I didn't have any of the carpentry skills that I do now. And it's a skill that I'm so glad I do have. I don't have to hire anyone to do anything on my property except for really
Hmm.
electrical.
Hmm.
Anything over 100 amps, I don't really feel comfortable messing with. And then in terms of, operating the machine and the landscaping, that came to me a little easier, I'd say. It's a lot of common sense in that sense. And also,
Yeah.
when you can demolish a building, you can figure out the machine as you go. If you hit the
Yeah.
wrong wall, it's not the end of the world. So
Right.
I got
Right.
yeah, so I got pretty good with the machine and figure out, to get more proficient with that. And so then I did the demolition of the house first. And I think that set me up really, really well to dig an even trench for the water, to dig that trench for the electrical, to build that rock wall. You have to be you have to have a finesse with where you place the rocks and be able to twist them. And it's no by means perfect, but I
Right.
think if I didn't
Right.
have probably about 20 hours in the machine of demolishing a house, I probably wouldn't have been as efficient, and I probably wouldn't have gotten it done in the time I had allotted myself to have everything done by.
Yeah, I love it. So it's really like kind of learn as you go and build up your skills on kind of easier projects first, and then, tackle the harder ones later.
Yep. Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is I was the week I had the machine, I had to get
Hmm.
everything done because I started work like that next Tuesday.
Okay.
And so I needed a house, and I needed internet, and I needed, a place to stay. So and that's, I think, a lot of my story is I don't have a choice, and I just have to do it. And when you just have to do it, you don't have time to second guess and think like, oh, is this the best way, or am I not
Yeah.
really skilled enough? And you just do it. And I think that's credit to, how I was raised. My parents, are always like, just go do it, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely a mindset that I have. And I think, when you live more of an alternative lifestyle, I think more people are inclined to have naturally.
Totally. So yeah, let's actually shift into the lifestyle chat because I know you travel a lot and you do house sitting gigs.
Yep.
So tell me about how that all works. Like what's like an average year in the life of
Oh
Lazrin
man. Oh man.
or
Yeah.
season, like
I'll start from December of last year. How about that?
okay. Okay.
So since December of last year, December 1st, up until last night, I spent 6 nights in my house.
Okay.
Yep. And so that's a combination, probably 95% of those days was house sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so house sitting can mean a lot of different things for many people. And when I say it, I mean the house either has animals or no animals. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
usually there to take care of animals for the most part. Most of my clients have animals, usually dogs.
Okay.
And so I get to stay at their houses when they travel. And I've done this for 12 years.
Okay.
And so I've established this network of clients that really trust me. And that's something that I really value. They're beautiful homes. I really value the homes I get to stay in. And so they usually travel for long periods of time. One of the clients since December, I've been at his house for 2 months of those since December.
Yeah.
And then another client, I've been there for a month. They're not always, a full month at a time. It might be a week here, 2 weeks there.
Yeah.
And so when I'm local and I'm house sitting, it's all local. I don't travel outside of Vermont for it yet. It might change.
Uh-huh.
But I can stay at the house I'm house sitting, and then I do a short-term rental on my Airbnb
Yeah.
at the house I have at the tiny house. And it works beautifully. So Vermont has a massive housing issue. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is, but finding a place to rent in Vermont, you have to basically give up your left arm and still pay,
Yeah.
a lot for a not nice apartment. So I've always kind of felt bad about just renting it out on Airbnb. And then if I went and took another apartment to live in, I would kind of feel bad about that. Vermont's
Mm-hmm.
even changing laws around short-term rentals.
Yep. Yep.
But because the house would just be vacant when I house it, I feel comfortable about it. I truly love sharing the house with others. I've had some great relationships come out of Airbnb. People that are, just curious, they're going to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They just like the design. They want to talk about it. So I do love that interaction that creates, and it's like a win-win. And so I don't have to work that much, which is like everyone's dream, right? And I've actually
Of
like kind of
course.
been pinching myself since basically October of last year, because that's when I really did this intentionally. And I have one job I have to commit to 3 days a week. It's about 15 hours at the most. And other than that, I can pick and choose what I want to do because my house sitting and Airbnb lines up so well.
Nice.
And then a lot of times too, so, what was it? I think maybe the first week of March, end of February, beginning of March, I had about 10 days in between house sitting clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I kind of want to get out of Vermont. I always kind of leave that time of year. Everyone knows it's a little dark. It's kind of cold and gray. It's not very pleasant to always be here full winter.
Yeah.
And I just went to Iceland for 10 days and still rented out my house on Airbnb because it was more financially feasible to go travel for 10 days than it was to just live in my own house and stay in Vermont. And so that was the first time I really did Airbnb while I traveled. And I'm fortunate enough to have a sister close by who jumps in and does the cleaning for me. And she's someone I can call if something, if an issue rises up. So I have that network there, which is amazing. I wouldn't be able to do it without that. And then, I do I do have to be mindful that I actually do have to live in my own house to get stuff done. And so I actually blocked off these next 2 weeks to be at my house. And I actually just bought an excavator. So I have like a lot of projects to do. I have to like redo the driveway, and I'm actually going to change my pond, change the fire pit, and then I actually have access to mountain biking trails right out my back door now. So
Fantastic.
but I had to be I had to be very intentional about actually living in my house. Cause it's so easy to just house sit and travel, but then like all the projects just pile up and it's not worth it at the end of the day. And I do love where I live, which is something that I wasn't sure when in my life I'd be able to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since I built this and moved it to this land, I genuinely enjoy coming home, sitting in my house, working from my house, working on the land. which is at my age, I didn't think I was going to be able to attain quite yet. So it's really nice.
That's awesome. And I just want to ask just like a follow up question about the house sitting gigs. Are you getting paid to do the house sitting, or is it just kind of like you get to be there for free in this beautiful house? Like kind of like that's your payment.
Yeah. No, I get paid. And
Wait.
yeah, and it's not cheap. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's why like doing Airbnb and house sitting, I hit my financial numbers, and which is why I don't really have to commit to a job 9 to 5. And that's one thing I also love is I love giving my time and the skills I have learned. I love being able to give that back.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I have, 4 days off,
Mm-hmm.
I'll go help my friends, build something on their house. Or
Mm-hmm.
a friend of mine is doing like a homestead out in Starksboro, and they built a timber frame house from all the wood. Like he felled the trees,
Wow.
he did everything. And so, I went and helped him raise it, did the siding, and it just feels good to give back. And I generally
Yeah.
love it. And to be able to
Yeah.
sit there and play with sawdust and get gross and dirty and sweaty and learn and do a different type of construction than I got to do is always
Yeah.
a blast. And it's a feel good moment for me for sure. So it's definitely a selfish endeavor.
Nice. Yeah, and that was one thing that I struggled with in the tiny house, and also like my current home is also quite small, which is that like I don't have a place for a table saw and a chop saw and like a space to do those kinds of projects. I'm guessing you get to use your garage for that though.
Yep. Yeah. My garage is a saving grace. I have acquired
Yeah.
probably too many tools at this point since I bought it.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have a zone I don't let Airbnb guests access that. I lock it up when I leave, but it's a zone that can be really messy, can store everything I need to do, store extra Airbnb stuff, store my own personal stuff when I have to move out. And so a garage, I couldn't live, or I would have to build a shed. The garage is a saving grace, especially the lifestyle I live with the amount of toys I have, the activities I do. The garage is definitely necessary. And then also in the winter in Vermont, it's nice not to have to shovel your car. So that's a plus.
Yeah, very nice. As long as you've left the garage empty enough to put the car inside of the garage.
Always. I have always told myself that I will never allow my garage to get full enough that I can't fit a car in it, because that defeats the purpose.
Nice. Now, does the excavator live on the property with your tiny house, or is it somewhere else?
It currently is. I literally picked it up yesterday from the dealership. So I was definitely like a little kid on Christmas morning yesterday. So it's parked here for now. But my business partner who I went in on it with, he has a shop down in Ferrisburg. And so once I do most of my work, it'll live there in between myself using it, him, and then renting it out. That's where it'll kind of live. But who knows? Maybe it'll end up here more often than not. I wouldn't be too bad with that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get the water slide built.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, do you have is there a next tiny house or a next house build in your mind, or are you kind of sticking with what you've got for now?
Yeah, I definitely miss the challenge of it. I think if you talk to my family and friends, they might push me on the fact that I enjoyed the build, because there's definitely moments when you're in it, you get frustrated, and it's a lot to do by yourself. Every decision falls on you.
It is.
Every design choice, you can't look at someone and be like, can you help me with this? Or I'm really frustrated. Can you make this cut? So there's definitely moments that I'm like, okay, I definitely did not enjoy that day. So I would love to, the idea to be involved in building or creating something is definitely on the horizon. And I think for me on the personal side, I'm going to be building a sauna. That's something that I've always loved. And then how my property is set up, it's really private. And with the pond and the clearing I made, it's just a very serene place to be. And then also thinking about kind of a business standpoint, if I build a sauna and I let Airbnb guests use it, you're like, okay, can I get another $25 per night for that? Right. Yeah. So even though it's a personal endeavor, it benefits me on the professional side, the financial side as well.
Totally.
I kind of did the calculations that I think after 10 months at $25 more per night, it would pay for itself.
Nice.
More or less. So that's something on the horizon. And then back to like the housing shortage in Vermont, it's kind of been tickling at the back of my brain for the last few months and maybe a few years at this point, is single family housing is not sustainable, especially in Vermont, especially, in the whole US. We don't build efficiently here,
Hmm.
period. I think this was a while ago, but I remember listening to a podcast or reading an article. On average, one person in the US lives in 1,000 square feet of home,
Yeah.
which is a lot of space for one person. And the one thing I love about the tiny house is that it is movable. And like when I do pull it off the land, I'm not really leaving a mark. There's no foundation. You could put helical screws in or something like that,
Hmm.
but you're not disturbing everything. And you can either trash it, if it gets to the point where, it's like 20 years old, and you can't
Hmm.
really use it, it's not worth saving, or you can just move it on to the next one and buy another piece of land. And
Yeah.
so, kind of in my mind, it's like, what would it look like to buy property, do the land improvements that's necessary to have a house, so a septic or connect to town
Hmm.
or add water, all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. But what would it look like to bring the tiny house lifestyle more up front and center to people in Vermont? That it's happened across the country. Colorado, California, Montana, Washington. They're pretty popular, but being able to offer someone a chance to live in Vermont with a reasonable rent and be able to enjoy the land, and why a lot of people move to Vermont is for the peacefulness and the green and the mountains and the water.
Hmm.
So kind of in my mind is like, okay, what would it look like to basically make a tiny house village, but
Hmm.
also be very intentional with the design of where you place the houses so that they feel secluded, they feel private, but yet you don't have to pay $5,000 to get this seclusion, this privacy, this picturesque Instagrammable, Vermont lifestyle that I think a lot
Yeah.
of people moving here are trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And that challenge is fun. I've never had to put in a septic tank. So what does that look like? That's kind of goes through my mind. I've
Yeah.
never, had to pay for a well to get dug, or I've never had to connect to a main water line. And I've learned that I love learning more about construction and the whole process. And I like getting dirty. I like getting sweaty. I like getting down and dirty with it. So
Hmm.
that's potentially on the horizon. There's a lot, contingent on that. State laws, town zoning laws, all kind of play a role. And then also the financial backing is key as well.
Yeah.
Banks are still kind of uncertain on what to do with tiny houses. Land is hard to buy with a loan, but that's kind of in the works, that I'm definitely going to be pursuing pretty actively this whole summer.
Nice. Well, maybe there's a listener who has some financial resources who wants to back a project. They
There
can.
you go. Yeah, I'll take it.
Nice. Nice. Well, Lazrin Schenck, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. I love your lifestyle, and I really admire everything that you've accomplished.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ethan, and thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Thank you so much to Lazrin Schenck for being a guest on the show today. You can find the show notes, including photos of Lazrin's house and a complete transcript of this episode, over at thetinyhouse.net/263. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/263. Well, that's all for this week. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast.